Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ali and today we're going to discuss UFOs and unidentified aerial phenomena. So I know what you're here for. You want to see footage, so let's get started, and I need you to pay attention to a certain few things.
Intelligently controlled machinery that is not understood to be in the possession of the United States, China, or Russia.
I mean, some of this behavior challenges our understanding of physics, so I think this is going to change a lot of perceptions.
There's a whole fleet of them. This morning, a report that the government cannot explain those mysterious objects caught on video by the military. Two cylindrical spheres disappearing into the ocean. The Pentagon has found no evidence that the phenomena are aliens. And although the Pentagon has confirmed the validity of the videos, they still cannot explain what their cameras and sensors have been picking up. The Pentagon declined NBC News' request for comment.
2004, an oval shape hovering. And in the words of the Navy pilot who recorded this, not behaving by the normal laws of physics.
And we saw this little white tic-tac looking object, and it's just kind of moving above the whitewater area.
Do you ever drop your phone and it sort of bounces off the countertop and then bounces off something else, and then it's sort of like no predictable movement, no predictable trajectory?
Yeah.
I guess it was just
like a ping pong ball.
no acceleration.
Very, very random.
Acceleration.
As deep, so you're sort of spiraling down?
Yep. The tic-tac still pointing north-south. It goes and just turns abruptly and starts mirroring me. So as I'm coming down, it starts coming up.
So it's mimicking your moves.
Yeah, it was aware we were there. You want to see how close I can get. So I go like this, and it's climbing still. And when it gets right in front of me, it just disappears.
Disappears?
Disappears. Like gone.
And you saw no visible propulsion?
Right.
No.
Wings or anything to make it fly in our atmosphere? U.S. military's most advanced aircraft.
In the case of the Nimitz, these vehicles seem to have unlimited loiter time, which we don't have. Then the acceleration is far beyond anything that we're capable of.
What's the fastest one of our jets can go?
Probably for a very brief period of time, 1,500 or 2,000 miles an hour. Nothing near the degree of acceleration that has been observed in some of these cases. There's nothing we could build that would be strong enough to endure that amount of force and acceleration.
If you've been keeping up, you've probably noticed 4 or 5 things that are very consistent throughout all of these UFO sightings, right? One, and most difficult to explain, is the crazy acceleration of these unidentified aerial phenomena. 2, they disappear suddenly and appear out of nowhere. They don't have any jet exhaust, right? So it doesn't seem like anything is there's no propulsion system, right? It just moves. Number 4 is they all seem to have a same classification of shape, right? They're like spherical, ellipsoid, and such, right? Or saucer shape, right? And 5, which unsurprisingly, they're all seen around, military bases and U.S. military equipment. So I believe I have the theory that explains all of these unexplained questions that we have about it, right? And one of the biggest problems with this is the physics. People are continuously saying they don't understand the physics. It makes no sense. How could this be possible? Aliens must be aliens. So I want to briefly go over the 3 laws of motion, because any theory that you're going to have about UFOs or any theories in general need to be sound in terms of a physics perspective, right? Anything that you could toss out as an idea will not be accepted scientifically unless it can be backed up mathematically, and we call that physics. So the first law of motion: objects at rest will remain at rest. Objects in motion will remain in motion in a straight line unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Now you have seen examples of that, right? It's just inertia. A second law is force equals mass times acceleration. So every time you see something accelerate, there is a force that correlates with it, right? You can't just have acceleration without any force, which is one of the big problems of the UFOs that we see. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So just because there is a force that causes acceleration, that force needs to have a counterpart, right? So there will be no free energy in terms. One of the biggest problems that we have in understanding the unidentified aerial phenomenon is the fact that we all are considering them to be objects with mass that have to adhere to the laws of physics, right? If you have mass in this universe, unfortunately you're restricted by the laws of physics, and somehow these UFOs are bypassing these laws and doing their own thing. You know, an unidentified flying object, when you look out in the sky and you see something hovering, you're going to assume it's an object. You can see it, it's moving, so it only makes sense that it has mass. Now, and one of the reasons why I thought about this current theory that I'm going to discuss with you is because they changed the name to unidentified aerial phenomena. And I think that change was not an accident. There was an intentional move to use the word phenomena, and here's why: because a phenomena does not need to have mass. And how is that even possible? I think I can explain it, how this is possible. However, it's going to require some dimensional thinking, because I think these unidentified aerial phenomena, or UFOs, are four-dimensional shapes, objects, and we in the three-dimensional world are seeing three-dimensional cross-sections of it. So here I have a tesseract rotating, and one thing you have to understand about the fourth dimension is you can see all of 3D at once. But let's first of all do a small example before we jump ahead of ourselves. One of the simple things I can give an example of is if you're holding a laser pointer and you point it on a flat surface, you're able to, your end effector, the actual laser light that hits the page, you can make the end effector move in Cartesian vectors. You can go up, down, left, right on the 2D plane. And you can also have more complex movements. However, these movements all correlate to how you initially move the angles of the intermediate and short axis of the laser. Basically, there is a direct mathematical correlation with the change in position of the laser point, the end effector, to the change in the angle that you have in your hand. So here's a hypothetical example, right? We have a smart, high IQ, three-dimensional creature, and then we also have a lower IQ, two-dimensional being in a two-dimensional world. So what you're seeing here is a three-dimensional creature is using a laser point and it's pointing down at the two-dimensional world, and something strange is happening in the 2D universe. The two-dimensional creature, when it's looking out into the horizon, it will see something appear out of nowhere. This is one of the key characteristics of UFOs. They appear and they disappear. And he will see this phenomena move from left to right, and it moves in all kinds of crazy ways that are unexplainable to the laws of physics in his universe. And the next thing it does, it just disappears suddenly out of nowhere. Blimp, and it's gone.
When it gets right in front of me, it just disappears.
Now, the reason why I call this a two-dimensional phenomenon, because the laser point has no mass, technically, right? The actual photons adhere by the laws of physics and stay in the line of motion, right? Objects in motion stay at motion until they hit the paper. Now, what's happening is, as our smart creature or three-dimensional person is moving the laser point, things are moving. The individual photons are not moving, but the two-dimensional creature is seeing that something is buzzing right by him, and he can't explain it. And therefore, it becomes an unidentified aerial phenomenon, the 2D version of it. And the 2D version adheres to all the laws of physics, right? Because we're able to observe what is happening from the third dimension, we're able to understand how the laws of physics still apply to this situation, and there's nothing unique about the phenomenon. What's really happening is we're just clowning the dude, or if it's not us doing it, it's an alien, right? And if you're asking why aliens, because anything that requires some kind of explanation must be aliens. Whatever I'm proposing does not discount that it could be aliens, maneuvering these UFOs. Let's take the same scenario we've created, right? The 2D laser point, and go up to the next level and give you an example of what we currently as a human species are capable of with the technologies that we have. We have devices that can observe two-dimensional data using a three-dimensional tool. So if I'm explaining it this way, it sounds kind of pretentious. However, it is just a telescope, right? We're able to see and gather two-dimensional data from the moon if you're looking at the moon through a telescope, and we're getting it into our eye, right? And we're able to go far, far away across the universe without actually physically having to be there. So it's almost like teleportation. We're on the surface of the moon, however we get 2D data. Now, the crazy thing about this is, just like the laser pointer, if you change the angle of your telescope slightly, you're able to travel from one side of the moon to the other side of the moon at the speed of light. And that kind of movement, I guess you could do it with a strong laser. If you point a strong laser at the moon and then you rotate your hand, move your hand, the laser point will travel across the surface of the moon, and it will be crazy to explain to someone on the surface of the moon. But for us, observing it from further away, we exactly know what's happening, right? We've even gone so far to send our three-dimensional tools to Mars to observe 2D data and send it back to Earth. Now, most of you guys are used to getting 1D messages from Snapchat only. And here's another example that I want to give you, something you might have known, but it's good to reflect on this, right? Some of us in school, when we learn about mathematics, we do parabolas, we do circular ellipses, we have hyperbolas, right? So these are the shapes that we learn the formulas of, and we've only seen them on two-dimensional graphing paper, right? But what you don't know is that all these shapes, all these graphs, are part of the same three-dimensional cone, right? So if you just take different cross sections of these cones that I've shown here, you're able to create ellipse, circle, parabola, hyperbola, and they might be difficult to learn at first, and even once you master them, you'll realize that there's a whole nother universe that you've been missing, and that all these things that you've learned are actually part of one thing. I quickly want to point out that if you place your plane correctly in this, you can create the y equals mx plus b line, and if you move your plane up to the very center point where the two cones are meeting, you could have the absolute value graph. One thing all of our three-dimensional tools that can send light or observe light have in common is that the cross sections are very similar, right? So a laser, for example, is a laser beam. It's a cylinder that shoots out of your laser, and the cross section of that is always a circle. That's why when you point a laser at something or someone, you always see it as a circular dot. And our tools that observe light instead of emit have a conical volume of operation, right? The light comes in through the cone, and the cross section of that is also a circle. So I want you to correlate this with the fact that all these unidentified flying objects have similar shapes. If you've been following me, we can go up to the next dimension. So here we have a four-dimensional tool. It's sending out a four-dimensional beam or four-dimensional cone to observe data. And now the question is, what does the end effector of that look like? What would the light of a four-dimensional laser be? And unfortunately, it won't be the cool circle from Rick and Morty. It will more likely be a three-dimensional sphere.
Two cylindrical spheres disappearing into the ocean.
Because whenever you take the cross-section of a four-dimensional object, you drop down one dimension to the three. So now the sphere ellipsoid shape is very suspect because it makes sense, right? That all these UFOs that we see are spherical, elliptical, and I think they are that way, or these particular shapes, not because of aerodynamics, but because they're actual cross sections. What I'm telling you is that unidentified aerial phenomenon that we see as a 3D shape does not have to have mass, because it is a cross-section of a 4D laser or a 4D observation device. And therefore, the laws of physics still apply, and it can still move and accelerate the way it does. Why would anyone want to use a 4D observation device? The answer is simple. When you look at a jet, an American fighter jet, from a 4D lens, you're able to see the insides of the jet at the same time as the outsides. You're able to see the front and the back. So the entire three-dimensional world becomes a single unit. And I have a tesseract sitting here in the background, and if you're familiar with dimensional mathematics, you'll be able to see. So it does make sense that all of a sudden these unidentified aerial phenomena are appearing around military equipment, because I think this is a way for whoever the operator is to gather information about our military. They're able to shine their four-dimensional light or their four-dimensional observation system on our military equipment and find out exactly what we have and how it works. This would explain why these unidentified aerial phenomena all of a sudden disappear and reappear. Because if you were shining a laser on the two-dimensional plane, on a two-dimensional creature, would it still see the light when it is immersed in it? And I think what's happening is when all of a sudden these dots, these spheres that we see, or the fighter jets see, and all of a sudden it disappears, is because these dots were pointed at them and they were engulfed inside the sphere. And what's happening is someone is gathering all of their three-dimensional data. So who's operating this four-dimensional system that's spying on the US military? Obviously, it could be aliens, right? It could be the Russians, could be the North Koreans, could be our Chinese buddies, could be the Nazis, anyone, right? So I hope that by now it is clear that the theory of looking at it from another dimension, a higher dimension, all these things suddenly make sense. So let's go back and revisit the 5 points. The crazy acceleration, right? The crazy acceleration is explained by the four-dimensional observation device not being in the same vicinity as what we see. The four-dimensional laser or telescope could be somewhere far away. So if it is aliens, they wouldn't even necessarily have to show up to Earth. They don't have to be physically present. And, another thing to note is that could a living being inside of these UFOs that accelerate so fast even stay alive with all that acceleration? So it only makes sense that it's not physical. Number two, they disappear suddenly, right? If I have a laser pointer and I turn it on and off, it can appear and disappear at will. So it only makes sense that these three-dimensional phenomena, or these unidentified aerial phenomena, can disappear. And no jet and exhaust. So you see, when we think about it from the perspective of a four-dimensional laser light, we don't need to have equal and opposite force. We don't need to have force to create acceleration. Just like the laser pointer on the 2D example, we're able to manipulate our four-dimensional device and get huge amounts of response far, far away by our end effector. So the unique shape is explained by a three-dimensional cross-section of a four-dimensional beam or observation system. And this explains why all these UFOs that the military sees kind of fall into the same category of shape, right? Spherical, elliptical, and saucer shape. And number 5 is they're seen around US military bases and just around the military in general, because now this also further supports my 4D theory that they are trying to gather three-dimensional data. Instead of taking pictures, they're able to see the whole assembly at once. And who it is, I have no idea. How they're doing exactly, I don't know. But I think my explanation or my theory still follows the rules of physics. It can be mathematically proven, and it only makes sense why these phenomena appear where they do and how they do. So let me know what you think. Do me a quick favor, like this video and share it so we can finally get to the bottom of this, because I think the Pentagon and general people in the military have made this public because they're looking for answers, and this theory just might be the one that could give us a real answer later on. Thank you.